You ever notice how the more you do something, the faster and better you get at it? Of course you have. It seems obvious. But what if I told you that you could actually predict that improvement? With math. Well, today we're diving into a really powerful business concept that does exactly that. It's called the learning curve. I want you to think about the last time you learned a brand new skill. Could be anything: a new video game, trying out a recipe, maybe a new process at your job. That first time, it's always kind of slow, a little clumsy, right? But the 10th time, you're just flying through it. It's an experience we all share. I mean, seriously, what is up with that? You've got the ingredients right, the heat seems okay, but that first one, it's always a total disaster. But by the time you get to the third or fourth, you've got the timing down, the flip is perfect, you're a breakfast master. And this isn't just about cooking, you know. That's right. This whole pattern of getting better with practice, it's so consistent, so predictable, that huge companies have actually built a tool around it. They use it to forecast costs, schedule production, and bid on massive projects. They call it the learning curve. So what exactly is it? Well, it's a lot more than just that vague idea that practice makes perfect. It's a real, quantitative method for measuring and actually predicting how much more efficient we get over time. Okay, so here's the official definition. This analysis tracks how the time it takes to do something drops as a person or a team gets more experience. And this happens for all sorts of reasons. Workers get better with their hands, processes get streamlined, the team figures out little shortcuts. The bottom line is, the more you do something, the faster you get. And this analysis puts a hard number on that improvement. And this chart illustrates it perfectly. See along the bottom there? That's the number of tasks you've done. Think of them as units you've produced. And on the side, that's how much time it takes to do each one. As you move to the right, making more and more units, that curve plummets. It shows that each new one takes less time than the one before it. Now, here is the absolute key to understanding this. The improvement isn't measured one unit at a time. No, the whole analysis hinges on a very specific milestone: the moment your total production doubles. Let's look at this table to make it super clear. Imagine a factory makes stuff in batches of 100. The first doubling happens when cumulative production goes from 100 to 200 units. Then the next doubling is when it goes from 200 to 400 total, and so on. This idea of doubling, well, it's kind of the secret sauce in the whole recipe. All right, let's pop the hood and look at the mechanics. How do we turn this idea into actual, useful numbers? It's probably a lot simpler than you think. Let's see how it works. Okay, I know this table looks a little intense, but the idea behind it is pretty straightforward. Those percentages, 70%, 80%, 90%, that's the learning rate. So an 80% learning curve means that every single time your total production doubles, the average time it takes per unit drops to 80% of what it was before. Let's just focus on that 80% column, because that's a really common benchmark in a lot of industry. Okay, let's try a quick example. Let's say your very first unit takes you 100 minutes to make. Now, you've just doubled your production from 1 unit to 2. With that 80% learning curve we just talked about, what's the new cumulative average time per unit? You got it. It's 80 minutes. You just take that 100 minutes and multiply it by 80%, and you get a new average of 80 minutes per unit. And if you double production again to 4 units, the average time drops to 80% of that, which is 64 minutes. See? Simple, right? But hang on. Here is where this gets really, really interesting and powerful. That 80 minutes we just calculated, that's the average for the first 2 units put together. It is not how long it took to make that second unit by itself. So let's break that down. If the first unit took 100 minutes and the average for 2 units is 80 minutes, that means the total time for both was 160 minutes, which means that second unit only took 60 minutes to make. Do you see? This difference between the overall average and the time for just one specific unit is what makes this analysis so incredibly useful for detailed planning. So this is way more than just some neat math trick. Real companies use this to make incredibly high-stake decisions every single day. Let's take a look at how it's actually applied out there in the real world. Okay, here's a scenario straight from a real business problem. You have to build the first super complex part, and it's going to take 10,000 hours. Now, you can't just multiply that by 8. That's 80,000 hours, and you'd lose the contract for sure because your bid would be way too high. You know your team is going to get faster. The question is, how much faster? And this is where the learning curve becomes a forecasting superpower. If we assume that standard 80% curve, you can actually calculate the cumulative average time per unit after all 8 parts are built. This lets you accurately predict your total labor hours and put in a bid that's both competitive and realistic. And there's the answer. After doubling 3 times, from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8, the average time per part would drop all the way down to 5,120 hours. You multiply that by 8 parts, and you get a total project time of 40,960 hours. That's almost half of that first simple guess of 80,000 hours. Amazing, right? So the learning curve is obviously an incredibly powerful tool for planning and forecasting, but it's not perfect. It actually comes with one pretty big challenge. And this quote nails it. Even though we know for a fact that this learning effect is real, it is incredibly hard for a company to know their exact learning rate before they start. Are they an 80% curve, or maybe 75%, or 82%? That tiny little difference can mean millions of dollars. So what do? Well, when they're facing this uncertainty, a lot of industries just adopt a standard, like the 80% curve we've been using, and they use that as a baseline for their estimates. It's a practical solution to an imperfect system, and it gives them a forecast that's good enough to guide those big decisions. And that brings us right back to where we started. We've seen how a predictable curve can model improvement in building something as complex as a spacecraft. So my final question for you is, what curves are shaping your own skills? Whether it's learning an instrument or mastering a new language, how could this idea of predictable improvement apply in your own life?